a special edition of First and 12. The expanded college football playoffs. What Big 12 teams have the best shot? Can both Utah and BYU make it? And who goes on to win it all? Our hosts are Mitch Harper and Alex Kirry on KSL News Radio and the KSL Sports Zone.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome on into First and 12 here on the KSL Sports Zone and KSL News Radio. Probably not hearing us actually on KSL News Radio this week because of General Conference. So it's KSL Sports Zone, and if you miss any part of the show, you can listen to us on podcast as well. Mitch Harper, Alex Kirry with you. Our weekly look at the Big 12 Conference and BYU and Utah football. And it's a different feel this week, Alex, because the Cougs and the Utes buys this week. So a little bit slow locally here in the Wasatch Front.
Look, we need the break, Mitch. Come on.
That's right.
We're like you and I are like the rest of the teams, man. Like we get banged up, you know, and I won't reveal all of how I'm feeling, you know what I mean? But like, can I go next week? I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe not. I don't know. You don't know.
Game time decision.
I'll be a game time decision. I'm not going to say anything else about it. There's no point for me to say anything else about it. No. It is. Yeah, it's been an interesting. I mean, my goodness, from a Big 12 perspective, locally, BYU and Utah are a combined 9-1, and that's a great place to start, right? If you're a local fan and you wanted this thing to go off well, I think that the biggest surprise, obviously, I mean, BYU has proven not just to be one of the big surprises in the Big 12 this year. They're one of the bigger surprises in the first 6 weeks of college football. And so they go into their first bye, and they need the break. And I think it's a break from two things, Mitch. So you need the break from the actual physical toll that it takes on you, because these conference games in and out are no joke. And you need a minute to get a breath. They've only played 2 conference games so far. They're 2-0. And I do think that it's interesting because I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, or at least to make you think that. I mean, last year felt so dire at the end.
No question.
But it was 5 games. It was a 5-game losing streak that BYU ended the season on. They started the season 4-1. So if BYU were 4-1 today, I bet that BYU fans would be like, okay, you know, the sky's not falling. Not great quarterback play. Some question marks in the run game. But, you know, overall, you're 4-1. You only have to win 2 more games to get the ball eligibility. Sound familiar? Like, that's exactly what we were talking about last year, right? But I think that it is a different situation. And you and I have talked about it at length. We talked about it. We actually had a discussion about it. You came on JJ and Alex this week, and I said, what was it? And you were like, hey, This is BYU's markedly better at the offensive line position. They're markedly better, at running back when the guys are healthy. But the biggest improvement is the fact that you can hang a hat on a defense at this point. Last year it was spotty performances and things like that. But there is a difference this year. 4-1 last year to this year's 5-0. It feels very different. And regardless of how, fans might feel about Jake Retzlaff's play, which has been up and down, you can't argue with the fact that he's 5-0. And in Utah's case, in a weird way, the sky's falling at 4-1. I'm trying to figure out, obviously, a lot of that has to do with the health of Cam Rising. And I think when you go into the bye week with a bad loss to Arizona, that leaves a bad taste in your mouth. If they would have lost that game 2 weeks ago, if they would have, at Oklahoma State or something like that, and if they would have, and then they win the game against Arizona at home, you feel probably a little bit better. So it's just, fans are up and down. We're up and down as media guys talking about it too, because it's so black and white sometimes for us. We just go, no, it's going well, it's going amazing, it's going terribly. There's nothing really that far in between, and so overall, I think both teams are doing really, really well considering, and I even think that's the case for Utah, who are 4-1 despite the fact that Cam Rising, their $1 million man, hasn't played hardly at all this season.
What's going to be interesting with Utah is that their schedule is getting a little bit tougher than I think any of us expected. And I know you were pointing out in the preseason that Iowa State late in the season would be a tricky spot, and that's looking like that's going to be the case this year, whereas BYU's schedule seems a little bit lighter, at least late in the season. Now, the next 4 games, I could totally see a situation where BYU lost those 4 games, and that's kind of the beauty of the Big 12 in general, is that every game, really anything wild could happen in this conference. But I do think that Utah, though, they're going to still be in the hunt. BYU, I think because of them starting out so strong at 2-0 and how the schedule sets up with 4 games in Provo. BYU's in this conversation. I think it's great that, BYU and Utah, they have a chance here, Alex, to really become the tent pole programs in this conference. I think that to me is like the bigger storyline here beyond just simply this season. These two programs have the chance to be the marquee brands in a power league. And I think that's what's been kind of the fascinating piece of the Big 12 Conference coming into this post-Texas and Oklahoma life that they're in. Who's going to emerge as the big brands? And, man, I really hope that BYU and Utah don't lose any games between now and November 9th, because I can only imagine how off-the-charts big stage that's going to be between BYU and Utah, and it could really set off like this is the new era. These are the two, flagship programs that could really set the tone for the Big 12. Now, the legacy members of the Big 12 would say, no, like it's still us. But look, some of these the legacy programs in the Big 12, Oklahoma State not looking great, Baylor not looking good.
Right.
TCU's been up and down, and West Virginia's been up and down. So,
what about that legacy powerhouse that is Kansas football, though? I mean, we were expecting so much out of those guys. I mean, at what point were we supposed to really think that Kansas was going to fire it up and be the best thing since sliced bread? Either way, this conference
I was believing.
I know. Let's go back for a minute to where everybody called me an idiot for saying that Utah was going to lose a game at home this year, because that was I brought it up about the Iowa State game, and of course the last thing on the planet people thought was going to happen is Utah was going to lose to Arizona. At least you know how we are in the preseason. You know how fans are in the, when they start to look at the schedule and they go, look, give me some projected wins. They go, win, not going to lose that one, not going to lose that one, not going to lose, win. They go, well, looks like we're going to be 11-1. I guess we might lose in the college football playoff, or whatever it might be. So, people overreact, and we're the same types. But I do think that we're finding out a lot about this conference, and that is, I think that in the end, everybody's walking away from at least the first 5 or 6 weeks of the season, and it's exactly what you and I said it was going to be. We just didn't know how it was going to shake out. There were always going to be surprises week on week. The steadiest program was supposed to be Utah, right? Yeah. We even knew that Mike Gundy was going to fail us a little bit. He's done that. He's done that to us in the past, and it might be that they can't pull out of this one. But I do think that overall, it's been a great start for the conference so far. It's not anywhere near where I thought it was going to be. Colorado is overperforming. Kansas is underperforming. BYU is overperforming. You have Baylor, who we thought for sure was going to rebound and figure it out because Dave Aranda's job was going to be on the line. No can do. So there's a lot of stuff in here. It's great because the biggest surprises in the conference mostly are centered around where we are right here. BYU is the biggest shock in terms of wins and losses and performance. And frankly, I was looking at the numbers, I think, this week too, Mitch. And BYU is total defense in the country is at 24, top 25 total defense. Total scoring, top 20 team. So total scoring defense, it's a top 20 team. And nobody's looking around and going, this offense is abysmal, because they've put up what? You got 35 or 34 points last week, 38 points the week before that, against two teams that if you would have said in the preseason, you'll score 38 against Kansas State at home and you'll win by 29. That in itself is already, I don't know where it is, and maybe this is hyperbole, Mitch, but that win against Kansas State, not just for how weird that game was and how wild it was probably one of the most marquee wins in Kalani Sitake's era as a head coach because of when it came. And I think certainly in the Big 12, it's probably got to be up there as the number one win that they've had in the conference.
No question. And, BYU looks legit, and they're playing some great football, and they're getting answers from guys on the second, third units. They're digging into their depth and still finding answers. So BYU is playing at a high level, and I still feel like they can play loose. They can kind of play the chip on the shoulder, underdog mentality, whereas I think there's going to be a little more pressure going forward for Utah, because you can't just assume that, Kyle Whittingham's going to be around forever. Heck, he laid out kind of a timeline at Big 12 Media Day where he said he wouldn't be the head coach for that Utah-Miami game in about 3 years in Vegas. So time is ticking to get Witt that playoff appearance that he covets. And this team's got to turn it around. And that loss against Arizona kind of evaporated their margin for error for an at-large bid, because I think Utah's one of the few teams, because of their program, their recent success that they've had nationally as far as getting to Rose Bowls, they kind of have a little bit of that cachet that could, maybe get a coach in that playoff meeting to bang his fist on the table and say, I got to get Whittingham, in that at-large pool. Whereas not many of these other Big 12 teams have that going for them in a selective process. So, Utah's got a little more pressure, whereas BYU, I still think, despite being at the top of the standings, they can still play this, no one believes in us, chip on the shoulder, salty Kalani every Monday, chewing out me. I love it. Let's go.
Hey, but I really wish you would have given them a fair shake, Mitch. No one believed in them but them in that room. That's my favorite one so far this year. And look, it could all fall apart.
No question.
Who knows? I mean, it could.
They could lose the next four.
I know. I mean, who knows how it's going to shake out? But I think people can look around and say, was there an improvement this year so far? Absolutely. And I think most importantly, there's a massive improvement in the guy who's taking snaps under center. Part of what we're doing today, though, the show's a little bit different than the normal kind of setup during the week, because we don't have a BYU game and we don't have a Utah game to break down like we normally do. And so there's going to be a lot of time spent on what the landscape of college football might look like in the future, and the effects of what the other big conferences across the country with their decision-making, how that affects the rest of everybody else in college football, Mitch. And so some of the conversation today is going to be centered around what those playoff odds look like in the future. At some point, it's going to go to 14 teams. At some point, you're going to see a lot of changes in the landscape of what teams get in, what don't. At this point, we don't even know exactly what these conferences are going to look like. I'm looking at you, Mountain West and Pac-12. Everybody is trying to figure out where they live in this new world of college football, and we're going to kind of reflect it off of that all the rest of this week as well. Our program is brought to you by Macy's. Happy shopping. Of course, they've been an awesome sponsor for us throughout these first couple of years of 1st and 12. Mitch Harper, Alex Kirry. We'll take our first break. We'll come back. With the week that was for Kyle Whittingham, we'll jump into some sound of what he said this week, including, of course, the comments that he made about Cam Rising, and he feels like Cam Rising is getting not a very fair shake. But everybody has something to say about Utah's most coveted man under center, who's only played 3.5 quarters this year. It's 1st and 12. More to go right around the corner. 97.5 the KSL Sports Zone.